My name is Evelyn Grant, and at 71 years old, I thought I knew what grief was. I thought that after losing my husband, living through decades of life's sharpest edges, and building a quiet fortune, I understood the weight of loss. But I was wrong. I had millions in the bank and nothing left to wish for except more time with my son Daniel. That illusion shattered one Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same old wooden one Daniel had done his. Homework on, the same one where I'd handed him scrambled eggs and kisses before he left for med school. The phone rang, and before I even picked up, a cold fist squeezed around my heart. The voice on the other end was calm and distant, as if sadness was just another box to check on his form. "Mrs. Grant, this is Officer Evans from the state police. I'm calling about your son, Daniel Grant." Everything after that came as a blur. Medical words I didn't want to understand, collision, unresponsive, "I'm sorry for your loss." Daniel was gone. My only child. The man who called every Sunday just to check on me, the son who sent flowers every Mother's Day with little jokes tucked in the card. 43 years old, wiped away because some stranger decided their red light was optional. I hung up the phone and looked down at my own hands. They didn't look like my hands anymore. They seemed thin and pale, marked by the kind of emptiness that doesn't fade with time. Even the silence in my home had changed. It wasn't peaceful or gentle. It felt hollow, echoing with everything I'd ever lost and could never get back. People always said I was lucky, that I'd been left with so much after my husband Malcolm died 8 years ago. Smart investments, savings, a lovely house, but money feels like ashes when the person you want to share it with is gone. I don't even remember how I managed to plan Daniel's funeral. His friends and colleagues from the hospital took over, making arrangements, telling stories about how much he gave to others. They said he worked too hard, that he was always the last one to leave, that patients called him a miracle worker. Dr. Perez from the EA told me he practically lived at the hospital. If someone needed help, he showed up. I smiled and nodded, and thanked them all, but inside I felt sick with guilt. Had Daniel worked himself so hard because he was lonely? Had I missed signs, failed as his mother? We spoke every week, but was that enough? Should I have insisted on visiting, told him to take a break, pushed him to find someone to love him back? The funeral was held at St. Catherine's, the same little church where Daniel was baptized. The pews filled up with so many faces, neighbors, colleagues, even old patients. I wore the same black dress I'd bought for Malcolm's funeral, hoping I'd never need it again. Father Alonso spoke of Daniel's kindness, how his hands had healed not just bodies, but hearts too. I listened, but all I could think about was how quiet my house would be when I went home. After the service, we made the long, slow walk to Greenwood Cemetery. The sky was clear but cold, the kind of morning that hints at spring but keeps its distance. I walked behind the casket with my neighbor, Mrs. Kim, her arm hooked firmly through mine. At the grave, Father Alonso prayed while I watched Daniel's casket disappear into the earth. A part of me broke then in a way I knew would never fully heal. Parents aren't supposed to bury their children. The world is supposed to go the other way. As the crowd began to thin, people stopped to squeeze my hand, hug me, tell me what a good man Daniel was. I barely heard them. My mind was fogged over, heavy with sorrow. I was about to leave when I noticed 3 children standing near an old oak tree. 3 little girls, maybe 10 or 11, in black dresses that looked too grown up for their ages. They stood close together, hands linked, brown eyes shining with tears. What struck me was the way they looked at Daniel's grave, not curious, but aching with the kind of loss that children shouldn't know. Each girl placed a single white daisy on the earth, one after the other. Their movements were identical, as if one heart beat inside all 3. They looked so much alike it almost scared me, the same long dark hair, the same solemn faces, the same uncertain hope. I watched as they stood quietly, and then the smallest one whispered, "Bye, Daddy." It felt like being hit by lightning. I must have gasped because all 3 turned to look at me. For a second, their faces held fear, and then they ran, hands still locked, toward the parking lot. I stood rooted, the echo of "Bye, Daddy" pounding in my ears. It couldn't be. Daniel had never married. He would have told me if he'd had children, wouldn't he? Mrs. Kim tugged my arm gently. "Evelyn, sweetheart, you need to come home. Let's get you inside." I tried to ask her, "Did you see those girls?" But she only looked around, confused. "I don't see anyone, dear. It's just us now." Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Maybe the grief was too much. But that night, as I sat in my living room surrounded by too many flowers and cold casseroles, I couldn't stop replaying it all. The funeral, the stories, and most of all, those 3 little girls. Could Daniel really have had children? Had he hidden something from me all this time? I told myself I was just reaching for meaning, just seeing things that weren't there. But the memory of their faces haunted me. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the cemetery, no matter how foolish it made me feel. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. Because if those girls were real, if they were Daniel's, maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I hardly slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 3 girls standing at Daniel's grave, their faces blurred by tears and distance. The next morning, as soon as the sun lit up the sky, I pulled on my thickest coat and drove back to Greenwood Cemetery. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, confirmation maybe, or proof that my mind hadn't conjured those children out of heartbreak and hope. I told myself I was visiting Daniel, just another grieving mother bringing flowers, but I knew I was really searching for them. For the next week, it became a ritual. I would sit by Daniel's grave each morning, arranging new bouquets, talking to him quietly as if he could still hear. I watched other mourners come and go, saw the groundskeepers mow and rake, but no sign of the girls. I started to wonder if Mrs. Kim was right, if the shock and sorrow had made me see something that wasn't. Then, on the 8th day, when the wind carried the scent of rain and the cemetery was quiet except for birdsong, I saw them again. 3 little girls dressed in their school uniforms, navy skirts, white blouses, matching cardigans buttoned up to the neck. They walked slowly, each carrying a red carnation. I kept as still as I could, afraid to startle them. They moved together, placing their flowers on Daniel's grave, pausing with a seriousness that hurt to witness. The girl in the center spoke softly, "We miss you, Daddy. Aunt Beatrice says you're in heaven now." My heart squeezed tight. I must have shifted, because all 3 girls looked up, startled. The middle girl had the most serious face. Are you ... are you Daddy's mommy?" Her voice shook. I could only nod. The words caught in my throat. The 3 girls exchanged glances, silent conversation flickering in their eyes. The middle one stepped forward, her dark ponytail swinging behind her. "I'm Lila," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "These are my sisters, Nora and Tessa. We ... We were Daddy's daughters." I stared, trying to find Daniel. In their faces, the shape of their eyes, the tilt of their chins, it was there, small echoes of my son. "How old are you?" I managed to ask. Lila glanced at her sisters, then said, 10, we'll be 11 in August. So young." My mind spun with questions. Daniel had been 33 when they were born. Why hadn't he told me? Where had he kept them? I tried to keep my voice steady. "Where do you live?" The girls exchanged worried looks. With Aunt Beatrice, Lila finally answered. "She takes care of us. Where is Aunt Beatrice now?" I asked, my curiosity overwhelming my manners. Nora, the smallest, replied, "She's at work. She cleans offices. We're supposed to be at school, but we wanted to visit Daddy." Tessa's voice, softer than her sister's, added, "We didn't get to say goodbye." The pieces fell together. Daniel had told me he had a busy weekend before the accident, but he had something important to do. Was he planning to see them? My chest hurt. "Did you see your father often?" I asked, barely breathing. "Every other weekend," Lila replied, her eyes shining. "Sometimes after school, he would take us for ice cream or to the park. He read us stories, taught us to ride bikes. We have drawings and books, and..." She stopped, glancing at her sisters. Nora finished. "He always brought us little presents, coloring books, ribbons for our hair." Tessa nodded, a shy smile flickering across her lips. A flood of love and grief swept through me. Daniel had kept so much hidden, these girls, his life as a father, a whole world that I'd never known. Why didn't he ever bring you to visit? "Me?" I asked, unsure if I wanted the answer. Lila chewed her lip. "He said you were still really sad after Grandpa Malcolm died. He didn't want to make you sadder." I shook my head. That didn't sound right. Daniel knew how much I loved children. Did he think I was too fragile? Was he ashamed of something? Or just afraid to disrupt the careful balance of his world? Before I could ask more, a woman's voice called out from the cemetery gates. Lila, Nora, Tessa, where are you? A woman hurried toward us, her face drawn with worry. She wore simple work clothes and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She looked at the girls, checking them quickly for injuries, then noticed me. Her face went pale, wary, protective. Who are you? She demanded, putting an arm around Lila's shoulders. I stood slowly. I'm Evelyn Grant, Daniel's mother. The woman's expression tightened. Come, girls. We need to get back. To school. Lila turned back as they walked away, her face uncertain. Will we see you again? She called, her voice trembling. I wanted to answer, but Beatrice hustled them off before I could say a word. For a long moment I stood by Daniel's grave, the air heavy with everything unsaid. Those 3 girls are my granddaughters, Daniel's daughters. I had just found family and in the same breath lost them again. I walked home numb, my mind a storm of questions and regrets. Why had Daniel kept them secret? What was Beatrice afraid of? That night I sat in my kitchen, turning over everything I'd learned. Beatrice seemed desperate to keep me away. Why? Was she afraid I'd take the girls? Or was she trying to protect them? I thought about Lila's words, how Daniel was trying to protect me from more sadness. I wanted to scream at the walls, at the world, at Daniel for making decisions. I couldn't undo. The next day, I found myself driving aimlessly through old neighborhoods. Searching for a blue sedan, I only glimpsed at the cemetery. The city felt impossibly large. It was like chasing shadows. But I couldn't rest. I couldn't accept that my granddaughters were out there, living lives I knew nothing about. By Saturday, I realized I needed a new approach. I went to Daniel's old apartment, hoping the manager might remember something. The building manager, Mr. Lopez, remembered me from the days after the funeral. Mrs. Grant, he said kindly, is everything all right? I just have a question, I replied, my voice trembling. Did Daniel ever have visitors? Maybe 3 little girls and a woman? Mr. Lopez nodded, lowering his voice. Yes, 3 girls, always together, always polite. They came with a lady, a little older, hardworking. They visited every couple of weeks. Sometimes Daniel picked them up. Never caused trouble. Relief and confusion battled in my chest. I thanked him and left, feeling like I was collecting pieces of a puzzle that kept changing shape. That afternoon, unable to help myself, I drove back to Greenwood and waited. Just as the shadows began to stretch across the graves, the blue sedan appeared. My heart jumped as I saw Beatrice step out, followed by the 3 girls. This time they wore weekend clothes, jeans, sweaters, sneakers. I waited until they'd been at Daniel's grave a few minutes before approaching. Beatrice noticed me first and tensed immediately. Mrs. Grant, please. This isn't a good time. I kept my voice gentle. I just want to visit my son, same as you. Lila, Nora, and Tessa peered around Beatrice's arm, eyes wide with hope and fear. I saw Daniel's eyes in theirs, Daniel's gentle stubbornness and Lila's stance. We brought Dottie wildflowers, Nora said softly, holding up a messy bouquet. They're beautiful, I said, kneeling beside them. Beatrice stayed tense, but something in her expression wavered. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was relief that I wasn't yelling or demanding anything. Can we talk? I asked, looking at Beatrice, not the girls. Just a few minutes? Beatrice hesitated, her eyes flicking to the girls. Not here. There's a coffee shop on Maple. Give us 20 minutes. She pointed her finger at me, her voice low. This doesn't mean anything changes. I nodded, my heart racing. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Beatrice in a cramped booth, the girls sharing a plate of fries and chocolate milk. The diner was nearly empty. How long have you cared for them? I asked quietly. Since their mother died nearly 4 years, she answered, her voice flat with fatigue. My sister Mara had health problems. Daniel tried to help, but when Mara passed, there was no one else. I glanced at the girls, laughing softly at something. Nora whispered, What kind of health problems? Beatrice tensed. Private ones. Things that run in families. 2 of them, Nora and Tessa, are affected. Lila isn't, as far as we know, not yet. My heart clenched. What do they need? I whispered. Beatrice stared at her coffee, voice cracking. Physical therapy, appointments, medications. It's expensive, but worse, it's constant. I work nights to be there for them in the day. I looked at my granddaughters and realized they'd learned to take care of each other, Layla helping Tessa with her napkin, Nora steadying her glass. They deserve so much more. You're not alone anymore, I said softly, meeting Beatrice's exhausted eyes. I want to help. For the first time, her defenses dropped just a little. Maybe, she whispered, maybe we can figure something out. And in that moment, I realized I'd been given a second chance, a chance to show up for my family, no matter what it cost. We sat in that tiny diner for more than an hour, the noise of the kitchen and the hum of the refrigerator filling the pauses when words were too heavy. Lila and her sisters shared their fries, quietly passing the ketchup between them, never arguing or jostling. I noticed the small things, how Nora gripped her glass with care, her hands a little shaky, how Tessa leaned against Lila when she was tired. They watched everything, always checking that each sister had enough before taking anything for themselves. It struck me then how much these girls had learned to look after one another, even as children. Beatrice's eyes softened as she looked at them. Mara always worried they'd inherit what she had. The doctors found the same gene in Nora and Tessa that made Mara sick. We do therapy medication, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. Daniel knew? I asked quietly. She nodded, staring into her coffee. He was the only one who ever helped. He was at every appointment, always there with flowers or a new story. He wanted to protect them, and maybe you too. A wave of shame washed over me. He shouldn't have had to keep them secret. I would have helped. My voice shook. He thought you had enough pain after Malcolm died. He just wanted to keep the hurt in one place. Beatrice's tone was gentle, not blaming, just tired. She looked like a woman who had been alone too. Long, I turned to the girls, reaching across the table. I'm your grandmother. I want to know you. I want to help you. If you let me, I'll be here from now on. Lila looked to her sisters, her expression wise beyond her years. Daddy always said family means helping, even if it's hard. Nora smiled shyly. Tessa just nodded, her eyes shining. Can we really see you again? Tessa asked, her voice so small I had to lean in to hear it. As often as you want, I promised. Beatrice wiped her eyes with a napkin, her hand trembling. I'm tired, Evelyn. I work nights cleaning to pay the bills and get them to appointments. They're good girls. They don't complain, but sometimes it feels like too much. I reached for her hand. Let me share the burden. I have enough. I have a house, resources, time. I want to be part of their lives. She studied me, uncertainty clear in her face. It's not just about money. They need someone who's really here, who knows what each appointment means. What to say when the test results aren't good. I nodded. Then teach me. Let me learn. We don't have to figure it out all at once, but don't keep me out. We sat in silence, broken only by the clatter of dishes behind the counter. Nora tugged at Beatrice's sleeve. Can we show Grandma Evelyn our pictures? Beatrice nodded, and all three girls scooted over, pulling out a small notebook from Nora's backpack. The pages were filled with drawings of a tall man Daniel surrounded by three little girls. The pictures showed birthday cakes, swings in the park, bedtime stories. Tessa had written names beneath each figure in careful print. Daddy, Lila. Nora, Tessa, Aunt B. I turned the pages, my hands shaking. Did you draw these for him? I asked. Lila nodded. We made him a new picture every time he visited. He said he kept them in his wallet. Tears blurred my vision. He was proud of you, of all of you. I wish I'd known sooner. Nora rested her head on my arm, her hair smelling faintly of strawberries. We wished you would come too. Daddy always said you were really nice. There was no anger left in me, just sadness for what we'd missed and a fierce determination to not miss any more. I made a silent promise to Daniel I would care for his girls no matter what. Can I visit your house? I asked gently. Maybe help with dinner or read you a story? Tessa's eyes grew wide. We've never had a grandma at our house, she whispered. We'd like that. Beatrice nodded slowly. Let's start with a visit. You come over Saturday afternoon. Meet us on our ground. Let's go slow. As I drove home, 1,000 thoughts whirled in my mind. I imagined the girls in my kitchen, running through my garden, laughter echoing in rooms that had grown far too quiet. For the first time since Daniel's death, I felt a flicker of hope. That night, I called my lawyer and asked about custody, guardianship, what it would mean to help with the girls' care. I wanted to do this right with respect for Beatrice's role, but also for my own as their grandmother. I slept with the girls' drawings beside my bed, waking every few hours just to look at them and remind myself it was real. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I arrived at their house with a basket of cookies, my hand shaking as I rang the bell. Their home was small but cozy, the air filled with the smell of baking and crayon wax. The girls greeted me at the door, arms flung around my waist, giggling and shouting, "Grandma!" I felt their joy seep into my bones, filling cracks that had been empty for years. Beatrice watched from the kitchen doorway, her guard still half raised, but her face softer. "You really came," she said. "I told you I would." I helped. The girls set the table, listened to their stories about school, heard Lila play a few notes on an old keyboard, watched as Nora and Tessa colored pictures for me. When it was time for bed, I read them Daniel's favorite story, a tale about three sisters who saved their kingdom by caring for one another. As they drifted off, Tessa whispered, "Will you come back next week?" I kissed her forehead. "Every week if you want me." After the girls were asleep, Beatrice and I sat at the kitchen table over mugs of tea. "It's not going to be easy," she warned. "Their health. Sometimes it's a struggle just to get through a day." I squeezed her hand. "I know. But I don't want easy, I want them. I want to be here, whatever that means." We talked late into the night about medications, doctors' names, routines, and the little ways the girls comforted each other when things got hard. I wrote it all down, determined not to miss anything. When I left that night, my heart felt lighter than it had in months. I called Lila as soon as I got home, and she answered on the first ring. "Did you get home safe, Grandma?" she asked, her voice bright. "I did, sweetheart. I miss you already." Nora chimed in on speaker. "Can we visit your house someday?" I promised, as soon as Beatrice says it's okay, I'll make you the world's best pancakes. Lying in bed, I realized that I found a new reason to get up every morning. I'd lost my son, but I'd been given a second chance to love, to nurture, to belong. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither were they. Whatever waited for us, the doctor visits, the hard days, the learning curve of becoming a family, I was ready. For the first time in years, I slept through the night, dreaming of laughter and little feet running through my home. Sunday morning, I woke up to sunshine spilling through the curtains and the sound of birdsong, a small comfort, but enough to make me believe, just for a moment, that anything was possible. I called Beatrice to ask if the girls might want to come to my house for lunch. Her voice sounded tired but hopeful. "They haven't stopped talking about you since yesterday." "If you're sure it's not too much." "Not too much at all," I said. "Let's make it special." I spent the whole morning preparing. I found Daniel's old board games in the attic, arranged the living room with cushions on the floor, set the table with bright napkins, and put fresh flowers everywhere. When their car pulled up, I nearly tripped over my own feet getting to the door. Three small faces peeked out, first Lila, then Nora and Tessa, all wearing mismatched sweaters and shy grins. "Grandma!" they shouted in unison, running up. The walk to fling themselves into my arms. Beatrice followed at a slower pace, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She paused on the porch, looking at my garden. "I can see Daniel in them," I told her softly as she handed me a bag of snacks and medical supplies. "You did a beautiful job." She shook her head, her eyes wet. "We just survived. We made it from one day to the next." I put my hand on her shoulder. "That's more than enough." Inside, the girls were already exploring. Lila discovered Daniel's old chess set and demanded a lesson. Nora pointed out every family photograph on the mantel, wanting stories behind each one. Tessa settled herself on the window seat, staring out at the roses, then asked, "Is it true you planted those yourself?" "Every one," I said. "Would you like to help me in the garden next time?" Her smile was shy but eager. Lunch was a joyful chaos: spaghetti, garlic bread, the girls' giggles blending with the clink of plates. Nora, tired from the drive, rested her head on my arm while she ate. Tessa fed Lila her peas one at a time, and Beatrice hovered, watchful, making sure no one overexerted. There were medications to take, reminders for small bites, and moments when one sister would quietly leave the table to rest, but none of it felt like a burden. It was simply our life, new but already deeply familiar. After the meal, we sprawled out in the living room, Lila beat me soundly at checkers, cackling with delight. Nora drew a picture of all of us, careful to include my gray hair and Beatrice's blue scarf. Tessa curled up on my lap, her eyelids fluttering, fighting sleep. "You can rest, honey," I whispered, stroking her hair. "You're safe here." She was asleep in minutes, the weight of her small body grounding me, making me feel more needed than I had in years. Beatrice watched us quietly. When Nora and Lila went to the kitchen for cookies, she sat beside me on the sofa. "It's not easy for me to let anyone in," she admitted. "But I see how happy they are with you. I want this to work." I squeezed her hand. "We'll find a way." She told me more about their routines, the endless doctor's appointments, the specialized physical therapy, the insurance paperwork that never seemed to end. "I'm scared, Evelyn. I'm scared one day I'll get too tired to fight or I'll make a mistake and they'll suffer for it." Her voice broke and I reached out to her. "We're in this together now. You're not alone anymore." When it was time to leave, the girls clung to me, arms wrapped tight around my waist. "Can we come back soon?" Lila asked. I knelt too. "They're level. Anytime you want. This is your home now, too." Beatrice bundled them into the car, pausing before she shut the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, her eyes shining. "For seeing them. For seeing me." I waved until the car was out of sight, then walked through the empty house, every room echoing with their voices. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt full of possibility. The next week, I was at their house. Almost every evening, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just helping with homework, sometimes sitting with Beatrice at the kitchen table, talking through the paperwork that piled up faster than either of us could manage. We made a plan. I would help with medical bills, arrange for a nurse to come twice a week so Beatrice could rest, and set up a college fund for the girls. Just in case, I learned how to administer Nora's medication, how to coax Tessa to stretch her legs even when she didn't want to, and what to say to Lila when her energy ran out and she felt left behind. There were moments of frustration, times when Tessa's pain made her lash out, or Nora's exhaustion led to tears, but I found myself growing, learning how to love them through their bad days, not just their good. I started keeping a notebook of our days together, sketches of Lila and Nora curled up in a sunbeam, the list of Tessa's favorite books, a recipe for the cookies we baked when one of them had to stay home from school. Every night, before I slept, I wrote a letter to Daniel in my head, telling him what his daughters had done, how much they laughed, how fiercely they loved each other. Sometimes I woke from dreams of him, smiling and whole, his arms around all 3 girls. It hurt a pain as sharp as the day I lost him, but the ache was softer now, wrapped in gratitude for the second chance I'd been given. Then, one Thursday afternoon, we sat in a crowded clinic waiting room for Nora's neurology appointment. The doctor's words hit like a landslide. "The progression is faster than we hoped. If we want to try the new therapy, we need to start soon. It's a long program, months, maybe a year. You'll need support, resources, patience. And you'll need to do it together." Beatrice looked at me, fear and hope warring in her eyes. The girls sat close, clutching each other's hands. I squeezed Beatrice's shoulder. "We do it together. Whatever it takes. All of us." That night, Beatrice called me after the girls were in bed. Her voice shook. "Are you sure, Evelyn? This won't just change the girls' lives. It'll change yours, too." I thought of my quiet house, my bank account, the years I'd spent wishing for a family to fill my days. I've never been more sure. Whatever happens, we face it as a family. As I hung up, I stood in the kitchen and let the tears fall, grief for the son I'd lost, gratitude for the granddaughters I'd found, and a bone-deep certainty that loving these girls, with all their challenges and all their joy, was exactly what my life had been missing. And I made a promise to Daniel, wherever he was, I would fight for them every day. I would show up. I would not let fear or sorrow or the weight of responsibility scare me away. These girls were my heart now. I just hoped I was strong enough for the storms ahead. The morning of Nora's first treatment, the world seemed to hold its breath. It was early spring, the kind of day when sunlight is soft, but the air still carries a chill. I arrived at Beatrice's house before dawn, my arms full of pastries and thermoses of hot chocolate, trying to make the day feel ordinary. Even though every one of us felt the gravity of what was coming, the girls were already awake. Lila was pacing the hallway in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Nora sat silently at the kitchen table, her arms wrapped tightly around her middle, and Tessa hovered beside her, worry etched deep in her small face. Beatrice looked up at me, exhausted. She offered a fragile smile that cracked at the corners. "They didn't sleep much," she said softly. I knelt beside Nora. "I'm scared." "Grandma," she whispered, her voice so small. "I know, honey, me too, but you're not alone." She nodded, not looking up. "Promise you won't leave." I reached for her hand. "I promise." We drove through empty streets, the world slowly waking up around us. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and distant voices. As the nurses explained what would happen, Beatrice tried to be brave for her daughter, but her hands shook as she signed the forms. I squeezed her shoulder, reminding her that she didn't have to carry this alone. The hours crawled by. I sat in the waiting room with Tessa and Lila, reading picture books and telling stories about Daniel when he was little. Lila laughed at the idea of her father getting stuck in a tree, and Tessa's eyes grew wide as I described Daniel's first time riding a bike. For a moment, we could almost forget why we were there. When the doctor finally emerged, his face was solemn but not unkind. "Nora did well," he said. "It will be a long road, but she's strong. You're all strong." Beatrice exhaled. In relief, we went in to see Nora, her eyes half open, pale and tired, but managing a weak smile. Tessa and Lila crowded around her hospital bed, whispering promises and making her laugh with silly faces. Watching them, I realized how tightly they clung to each other. It wasn't just survival, it was love, fierce and unwavering. The next months blurred into a new routine. Hospital visits, therapy appointments, quiet afternoons when exhaustion overtook us all. I used my savings to hire a nurse part-time so Beatrice could rest, and a tutor who could come to the house when the girls were too tired for school. Every night I called Beatrice just to check in, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just listening as she cried quietly after the girls had gone to bed. There were setbacks. One afternoon, Tessa collapsed during a walk in the garden, her legs trembling with weakness. The fear in Beatrice's eyes nearly broke me. We rushed her to the emergency room, and while the doctors assured us it was a normal part of her condition, it felt like the edge of a cliff. We learned together to balance hope and caution, but there were victories too. Nora started to regain her strength after a few months. She learned to play the piano, her fingers hesitant but determined. Tessa grew braver, painting bright watercolors that covered the walls of Beatrice's house. Layla, always the loudest, announced that she wanted to be a doctor one day, just like her father, so she could fix people's hearts. And through it all, Beatrice changed too. I saw the exhaustion, yes, but also the way she learned to laugh again. The way she paused to hug the girls for no reason, the way she finally let herself lean on me. One night, after a particularly hard day, she turned to me and said, "I don't know how you're still standing." I smiled, pressing a mug of tea into her hands. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything, and because I have you now." "I have them." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with gratitude and something like wonder. "I thought I had to do all of this alone. I didn't know family could look like this." "Family looks however we make it," I said. "And I'm not going anywhere." As the weather warmed, the girls' spirits brightened. There were afternoons in the backyard with sidewalk chalk and lemonade, evenings on the porch watching fireflies. Sometimes Daniel felt impossibly far away, and sometimes it felt like he was right there with us, his laughter echoing in Lila's jokes, his stubbornness alive in Nora's determination, his gentleness mirrored in Tessa's quiet touch. One evening in early summer, all 5 of us sat under the stars, wrapped in blankets. The girls took turns telling stories, some real, some imagined. Nora's voice was steadier now, her cheeks round with color. Tessa made up a tale about 3 sisters who built a boat to sail to the moon, and Lila interrupted every 5 seconds. To add pirates or dragons, Beatrice leaned her head on my shoulder. "We couldn't have done this without you," she murmured. "You don't have to thank me. I need you just as much as you need me." The girls fell asleep one by one, warm and safe in our arms. As I carried Tessa inside, her weight light and fragile but real, I realized that I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the hard days, not of the future, not of my own grief. I'd found my family again, different, unexpected, but no less real than before. That night, before bed, I wrote in my notebook for Daniel. I told him about Lila's wild plans and Nora's progress, and Tessa's bright paintings. I told him about Beatrice's strength and the way our family had become something new, something beautiful. And I told him the truth, that every day was a gift, even the hard ones, even the ones. Full of fear, as I closed my eyes, I could almost hear his voice, gentle and proud. You did good, Mom, and I let myself believe it was true. By autumn, our little family felt like it had always been this way. Mornings were alive with the clatter of cereal bowls, the giggles of 3 girls racing to the bathroom, and Beatrice's patient voice corralling everyone into shoes and sweaters. Before school, I started to find joy in the smallest things, packing their lunches, folding their mismatched socks, running a brush gently through Nora's hair as she told me her dreams for the day. The house had changed too. The quiet corners where I used to sit in silence were now filled with crayons, dog-eared library books, and pink hairbands. Every surface seemed to bloom with reminders of childhood, watercolor paintings, spelling quizzes, drawings of kittens, and rainbows. Lila, true to her word, had started a doctor's journal filled with pages of imaginary diagnoses and hopeful cures. She'd leave it open on the kitchen table for me to read. I'd always add a note, sometimes a drawing of a smiley face, sometimes a memory about her father as a young boy, always a few words of encouragement. Nora's treatments continued. Some weeks were good, full of piano practice, laughter, and even cautious trips to the park. Other weeks, she would wake up pale and tired, her legs aching, her appetite gone. Those days, the house was quiet, and even Lila and Tessa seemed to understand. They'd bring her little gifts, a pressed leaf, a cup of cocoa, a secret note hidden in her pillow. Beatrice tried to hide her worry, but I could see it in the way she watched her daughter, in the way she hovered by Nora's door at night, listening for the sound of even, peaceful breathing. I learned to sit quietly with Beatrice during those times, offering her nothing more than my company and the gentle reminder that she was not alone. Sometimes she would talk about Daniel, about the future, about how much she missed the version of herself who didn't wake up every day afraid. Sometimes we'd just sit, letting the silence be enough. The girls became my world. Every Friday, we invented a new family tradition. Sometimes it was movie night, with the girls snuggled under blankets, arguing over which Disney princess was the bravest. Sometimes it was board games where Lila cheated with a mischievous wink, or baking. Afternoons that left the kitchen covered in flour and everyone sticky with laughter. It wasn't always easy. Nora's condition meant there were days when I found myself overwhelmed by helplessness. There were medications to remember, phone calls to specialists, and hours spent arguing with insurance companies who seemed determined to make things as hard as possible. More than once, I had to remind myself that money didn't fix everything. It made things easier, yes. It bought the best doctors and the latest treatments. But at 2 a.m, when Nora was crying in pain, when Beatrice was exhausted past words, when I felt like I had nothing left to give, money was just numbers on a screen. What mattered then was love, patience, and the small, stubborn refusal to give up. One stormy October night, the power went out. The girls squealed, running through the dark house, their faces lit by flashlight beams. Tessa clung to my side, nervous, while Lila and Nora turned it into an adventure. Beatrice found candles, and we all gathered in the living room, bundled together in a fort made of blankets and pillows. As rain lashed the windows, I told stories from my childhood about long winters, games played by candlelight, and the first time Daniel made a snowman so big it blocked the front door. The girls listened, wide-eyed, laughter echoing between the thunder. I realized suddenly how much had changed. How the empty echo of loss had been replaced by the noise of life, messy and unpredictable, but full. Later, when the power flickered back, Nora was drowsy, head on my lap, her sisters curled around her. Beatrice caught my eye over the heads of the girls. In that look, I saw gratitude and something else, relief, perhaps, that we were weathering life's storms together. Autumn faded into winter. Nora's health held steady, better than the doctors had hoped. Tessa and Lila grew taller, their cheeks rosy from cold mornings and afternoons spent chasing each other through the leaves. Every week, I found another note in my purse, another crayon drawing tucked into my coat pocket, tiny reminders of love from 3 little girls who had lost so much, but who kept finding reasons to hope. One Saturday, we went to the park for a picnic. It was a bright, brittle, cold day, the grass stiff with frost. Nora wanted to try the swings. At first, Beatrice hesitated, but I caught her hand. "Let's try," I whispered. Together, we lifted Nora onto the seat. Tessa and Lila cheered, and I pushed her gently, the joy on her face as she soared just. For a few moments, higher than her illness, higher than her fears, was something I'll never forget. When she finally hopped down, breathless and laughing, she ran into her mother's arms. Beatrice held her so tightly, tears streaming down her face. I knew then that we were making memories stronger than grief, moments that would outlast the worst days. There were days of worry, too. One evening, Lila came home from school quieter than usual. At dinner, she finally spoke. "Some kids said we're not really a family, that you're not our grandma for real." My heart clenched. "And what did you say?" She looked at me, eyes shining with hurt but defiance too. I said, "Families are who love you and show up, not just who you're born with." I reached across the table and pulled her into my arms. "You're right, Lila, families are who show up, and I will always show up for you, no matter what anyone else says." Tessa and Nora joined the hug, and soon Beatrice did too. We held each other, letting that simple truth sink in. We belong to each other now, by choice, by love, by every struggle and joy we shared. Winter brought its challenges. Cold and flu season meant more doctor visits, more worries, but we weathered it together. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find Beatrice awake in the kitchen, staring out the window. We'd talk quietly about Daniel, about the strange ways grief could surprise you, about how love could bloom in the unlikely seasons. By December, our little house was filled with holiday decorations, paper snowflakes, strands of lights, handmade ornaments on a crooked tree. The girls counted down to Christmas, and Beatrice baked gingerbread, her laughter finally easy and unguarded. On Christmas morning, Nora was the first to wake. She tiptoed into my room, clutching a card she'd made herself. On the front was a drawing of all 5 of us, stick figures holding hands, hearts above our heads. Inside, in careful handwriting, she'd written, "Thank you for finding us. Thank you for loving us. You're our real grandma forever." I pulled her into my lap, holding her close, feeling my heart so full it hurt. "I'm the lucky one, Nora," I whispered. The others joined us, and soon the living room was chaos, wrapping paper, laughter, the kind of messy happiness that feels like a miracle. That afternoon, as the girls napped and Beatrice dozed on the sofa, I sat quietly, looking around at the life we'd built. I thought of Daniel, and I hoped he knew how much love was still growing from the seeds he planted. In that stillness, I promised myself and him that I would keep fighting for these girls, for Beatrice, for this family we had claimed as our own. Whatever storms came, whatever losses or fears waited down the road, we would face them together. Because that's what family does. Spring arrived slow and tentative, sunlight stretching longer across our windows, making the girls restless for fresh air and new adventures. Nora's health continued to surprise the doctors. Each checkup brought cautious optimism, a little more strength in her legs, a little less fatigue in her voice. Still, every gain felt fragile, as if hope itself needed protecting. The new house was finally starting to feel like home. Margaret, still more comfortable with schedules than spontaneity, hung a whiteboard calendar in the kitchen, filled with appointments, therapy sessions, piano recitals, and my favorite family days. Every Sunday, we tried to do something special together. Sometimes we drove out to the waterfront and let the girls collect shells. Sometimes we just stayed in, building pillow forts or making pizza dough from scratch. One Sunday, Faith wanted to go to the Science Museum. Hope and Joy were excited, but I could see Margaret hesitate, doing her mental calculations, wheelchair accessibility, medication schedules, the possibility of a meltdown if the crowds got too big. I squeezed her hand. "Let's try," I said. And she nodded. At the museum, the girls darted from exhibit to exhibit, Faith peppering the staff with questions, Hope and Joy hanging back a little, cautious but curious. In the planetarium, they watched the stars appear on the dome overhead, all 3 holding my hands, awestruck by the darkness and the sudden, brilliant light. As the stars spun, I realized how far we'd come. How months ago, even a simple outing would have felt impossible. When we got home that afternoon, Margaret pulled me aside while the girls played in their rooms. "I'm scared sometimes," she admitted, "that I'll get used to this, that I'll start hoping too much, planning too far ahead. And then something will happen and we'll lose all this again." I wrapped her in my arms. "We can't be afraid of hope, Margaret. We're not guaranteed forever. No one is, but these girls deserve to dream as big as the sky. She wiped her eyes, then managed a smile. Thank you, Marlene, for everything. A few weeks later, we celebrated the girls' 11th birthday. It was the first time they'd had a big party, balloons everywhere. Homemade banners, cupcakes frosted with shaky hearts and stars. They each invited a few friends from school, and for an afternoon our backyard was filled with laughter and shouts and the shriek of the birthday. Songs and off-key? I watched them run and play, sometimes slowing for Hope and Joy to catch up, always circling back to include them. For a moment, there was nothing special about our family at all. We were just another noisy, happy group of people making memories. After the party, as I washed dishes in the quiet kitchen, Faith joined me, her eyes thoughtful. Grandma, she asked, do you ever miss your old life, before you found us? I set down a plate and dried my hands. I thought I had everything I wanted back then, Faith, but I was lonely. I didn't even know how lonely, not until you girls filled up all the empty places. Faith looked relieved. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better for you. If Daddy had told you about us sooner, I shook my head. We can't change the past, sweetheart. We can only love each other now with all our hearts. Hope and Joy joined us then, dragging Margaret into the kitchen for another round of hugs and leftover cupcakes. I pulled them all close, breathing in the scent of frosting, shampoo, and the unmistakable warmth of Family Dot. As spring turned to summer, the girls' world grew wider. Margaret enrolled them in art classes, and Faith tried out for the school debate team, her nerves barely hidden behind determined eyes. Hope took to the piano with new enthusiasm, and Joy wrote stories late into the night, sometimes leaving them under my door for me to read before breakfast. I encouraged every dream, cheered every victory, soothed every disappointment. Some days I still woke up afraid that this happiness was too good to last, that loss might find us again. But each day I found more reasons to trust in the future, to plant myself firmly in the hope we built together. Then, in late July, we got the news that would test us all. Margaret received a call from the hospital. Hope's latest tests showed some worrying changes. She might need to return to Baltimore for another round of the experimental treatment. I watched the news land on Hope's face, her eyes wide and scared. Joy clung to her, silent, while Faith demanded details from the doctors. Margaret tried to keep calm, but I could see the panic behind her composure. That night, she and I sat on the porch long after the girls went to bed, the humid air thick with worry. I don't know if I can do this again, Marlene, Margaret whispered. I thought we were past the worst of it. I took her hand in mine. You don't have to do it alone. We'll go back to Baltimore, all of us. We'll fight this together. Margaret nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. There. So brave, braver than I ever was. No, I said softly. You're brave every single day. We broke the news to the girls the next morning. Faith put her arms around Hope, holding her tight. Joy promised to write a new story for every hospital visit, so Hope would never be bored. As we packed for the return to Baltimore, I caught myself wondering for the first time in months if I'd made the right choices. Was I strong enough to go through another round of treatments? Was Margaret? Would Hope have the strength to fight again? The night before we left, the girls crawled into my bed, whispering their fears and hopes into the darkness. What if the treatments don't work? This time, Hope asked quietly. I hugged her close. Then we'll love each other even harder. We'll make every day count. That's all any family can do. Tessa, her voice trembling but fierce, said, We're not giving up. We're a team, right, Grandma? Right, darling, I answered, voice steady even as my heart ached. We never give up. And as we fell asleep that night, all tangled together, I realized that love is not the absence of fear, but the choice to show up every single day, no matter what tomorrow might bring. Our return to Baltimore was both easier and harder the second time. Easier because we knew the city, the hospital halls, and the names of every nurse who greeted us at check-in. Harder because we all knew what was at stake, how uncertain the next months would be. Hope faced the first weeks of treatment with the stubborn determination that reminded me so much of her father. She never complained, not once, even when the days stretched long and the medicine left her drained and pale. Joy was her constant companion, telling stories, making up games to pass the endless hours, and drawing pictures of all the things they would do once Hope was strong again. Faith, as always, kept her sister's spirits up and watched over Margaret. and me with the worried heart of someone far too young to bear that weight. Margaret took the night shift at the hospital, I took the mornings, and between us, we kept our little family afloat through every test. Setback and moment of hope. There were nights when I doubted myself, when Margaret and I would meet in that hospital cafeteria and just sit in silence, hands wrapped around paper cups of cooling tea. She once whispered, "You could have had a quiet life, Marlene. No one would blame you." I reached for her hand. But then I wouldn't have had a life that mattered. As the weeks turned into months, the girls settled into their own routines. Hospital tutors came by every day. Faith practiced her debate speeches in the waiting room, her voice echoing off the cold tile. Joy discovered a love of watercolor painting, filling the hospital walls with wild, hopeful splashes of color. Hope, after every session, asked for stories about her dad, about the places I traveled, about the wild things she and her sisters would do when they got home. At times, the progress was painfully slow. There were setbacks, days when hope spiked a fever or when the pain seemed more than any child should bear. But there were also moments of joy. One afternoon, when the treatment had ended for the day and the nurses had turned down the lights, Hope walked across the room without her walker, arms outstretched to Margaret, who burst into tears and laughter all at once. By the time autumn arrived, the doctors delivered the news we barely dared to hope for. Hope's condition had stabilized again. The treatments had done what the doctors only cautiously predicted. She'd be able to go home, keep building her life, and most of all, keep dreaming. We moved back to our new house, and the rhythm of our days shifted once again. The girls went back to school, Faith won her first debate. Joy's stories were published in the school paper, and Hope, bright and beaming, played a full recital at the conservatory. Margaret's eyes often filled with tears at the smallest things. A note from a teacher, a burst of laughter at the dinner table, even the sound of the girls arguing about chores. We celebrated every milestone, no matter how small, because we'd learned that tomorrow was never promised, and through it all, my own heart healed in ways I never imagined possible. The house was never quiet. There was always music or laughter or the soft hush of whispered secrets between sisters. Sometimes, late at night, I would stand in the doorway and just watch them sleep, overwhelmed by gratitude and the strange, beautiful luck that had brought us together. On the anniversary of Michael's death, we all visited his grave together for the first time. The girls each brought a single white daisy and placed it carefully, just as they had the day I met them. We told stories about Michael, his kindness, his silly jokes, his dreams for the future. I told the girls how much he loved them, how proud he would be of the family we'd become. Afterwards, as we stood together under the fading autumn sun, Faith asked, "Do you think Daddy can see us?" I smiled, blinking back tears. "I think he sees all of this. I think he's proud of us every single day." Hope took my hand, Joy hugged Margaret, and we all stood there, tangled together. The five of us, a family made not by accident, but by choice, by forgiveness, by the relentless insistence that love matters more than anything else. As time moved forward, our lives filled with new beginnings, school awards, holidays spent together, and quiet evenings in our new kitchen, everyone helping, everyone laughing. The house filled up with more photos, more artwork, more stories. Margaret finished her patient advocacy certification, and I found myself becoming not just a grandmother, but a mentor, a friend, and sometimes, late at night, a little girl's favorite person to whisper secrets to. What surprised me most was how much we all needed each other in ways none of us had expected. Margaret needed a partner in the trenches, someone to share the fear and the hope. The girls needed someone to cheer them on, to remind them of all the possibilities ahead. And I needed them just as much, maybe more, a reason to get up every morning, a way to keep Michael's love alive in the world, a purpose that made even the hardest days worth every moment. If you've listened this far, maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you felt loss or heartbreak, or maybe you're still searching for the family you're meant to have. I hope you find them. I hope you never let fear stop you from loving, even when it hurts. And if you have a story of your own, I'd love to hear it. Comment below, tell me where you're watching from, and know that you're not alone. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you want more stories of hope and family, you'll find 2 more waiting at the end of this video. And remember, sometimes, the greatest gifts in life are the ones you never expected to find. What would you do if you had the chance to change everything for the people you love? Would you be brave enough to say yes?